we're joined for this segment by Owen Miller. He is Vice President of the American Suppressor Association. Owen Miller, happy to talk with you again. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yep, glad to have you. So, we now have former ATF Associate Assistant Director of Field Operations, Marianna Mitchem, joining Everytown for gun safety. Should we really be surprised? I mean, is this just one example, or is there a whole revolving door between the ATF and anti-gun groups?
Yeah, this certainly isn't the first time we've seen something like this. You know, if you remember back to the early Biden administration when they put up David Chipman, a former ATF agent, as a nominee to direct ATF. He was working for the Giffords Group, another anti-gun organization. So I think this is just another glaring example of showing, the Biden era ATF's true colors in terms of attacking a lawful industry and the constitutional rights of law-abiding Americans.
Yeah, there's a bit of an irony behind this too. It just popped in my head. It was either Everytown or Giffords. Now that you mentioned them, that was when I was doing research about the Minneapolis shooting and gun laws in various states. I think it was Everytown, if I had to pin it down to one of them, who had in their website, as if it was a positive, listing states where teachers weren't allowed to carry firearms in the classroom to prevent a school shooting. So, that's the kind of mentality that they have, and it's a member of the ATF now apparently joining such a group with that mentality that the schools are supposed to be gun-free zones, which is exactly why the Minneapolis shooter picked that school.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate reality that, we see this time and time again, that unfortunately some ATF employees or former employees, they just support this radical disarmament fantasy that seems to be, the fantasy of the billionaire elites like Michael Bloomberg to see everyone disarmed and victimized.
Mm-hmm. And the ATF has certainly been doing its share of the work trying to get the public disarmed, rewriting gun rules. They were trying under Biden before Trump got elected. I don't know if they're still trying to get this rule passed where, any gun, it really stretched the definition of what a trigger pull was so that just about any gun could be considered a machine gun and thus banned.
Yeah, this was one of Miss Mitchem's, signature pieces when she was working under the Senate-confirmed Director Dettelbach under the Biden administration, was to push this frame and receiver ruling that really stretched beyond Congress's intent of the Gun Control Act to essentially redefine what is a firearm down to, base components, base materials that could be machined or manufactured into firearms. And that was never Congress's intent. So this was, again, another example of ATF, pushing outside the bounds of Congress's authority and developing their own rules and making their own definitions that didn't match with the law.
Mm-hmm. So it's rather disturbing is the real term. Bothersome makes it sound like it's a mosquito. Disturbing is the right term to see such strong connections between these anti-gun groups and the ATF, because the ATF, they're not supposed to be ideologically inclined. They're just supposed to be enforcing the laws that we have, such as they are, whether we like them or not. But then seeing them join up with these activist groups, seeing the, members of the ATF go to these activist groups and whatever, it kind of implies, well, what are they actually doing when they bend the rules and twist the rules around? Are they doing that because that's what they believe? Are they doing that because they expect a job afterwards? Really, whatever trust we had in the ATF is reduced even further.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating, for us in the industry. I'm reminded that this is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, not the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Anti-Firearms. They are there to serve as the regulatory body for our industry, and we expect them to do it in a fair and unbiased manner, and that's just not always the case. And then, it just further proves our point when we see former ATF officials who collected a government paycheck now collecting a paycheck from an anti-gun group like this.
Mm-hmm. And do they really even do anything with alcohol and tobacco either? Because I remember I was doing some research last year or something about the ATF, and I was trying to find when was the last time they did anything major with tobacco or alcohol. And I had to go back to the Obama administration for something like that.
Yeah, ATF was originally part of the Treasury Department, and that's what they were. They were revenuers, and in the early 2000s, they were moved into Department of Justice as more of an enforcement agency. And when that happened, a lot of the alcohol and tobacco components became part of what's known as the Tax and Trade Bureau, where they collect, these vice taxes. And so ATF really is much, much more focused now on the last two letters of their agency name, the firearms and explosives, than they are on the alcohol and tobacco.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you see this move doing for groups like these anti-gun groups there? Oh, we got a member of the ATF. When it comes to, maybe an independent person doesn't know much about guns, suddenly they see this group has a member of the ATF. Do you think that that would be a red flag or not?
Yeah, I think so. By having somebody like this on their staff, they can point, number one, they get kind of a behind the scenes view of what's happening at the agency. These things don't happen in a vacuum. She's still going to have contacts and colleagues that are still at the agency, where she's, maybe going to have access to information. And also, with that moniker of being a former ATF official, she gets to speak with some level of authority that I think is going to influence people's opinion. Those that, like you said, are less informed are going to view her statements as maybe carrying more weight than they should, because she's obviously got a political bias towards firearms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they wouldn't notice that perhaps they joined Everytown because they were already ideologically aligned, rather than joining because as whatever they saw as as they're in their role in the ATF made them think that way. They're not going to really pay attention to what the ideology behind it was or the reasoning. They're just going to assume, like you said, it's authoritative, that they're speaking based on experience.
Right. And people will assume that she somehow speaks on behalf of the agency still. And I know that not to be the case.
Yeah, well, not the entire agency, but like you said, there are still contacts that she would have at the agency too. So what does that mean for access to going back into the agency there, the access that this person might bring to the outside groups? So regardless of who's president, there's still going to be people in there that can muck up the works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just, another example of the revolving door stuff we got to worry about in Washington with politics and stuff. But now, the influence that these groups like Everytown and Gifford Center that bring in the ATF folks, is it confined to the left and a marginal amount of, independent voters, or just like how far reaching is this influence that they have?
Yeah, I think it is. It's obviously confined to people who are going to be in agreement with their mission and their policies. But like I said, it seems to be this sort of radical disarmament faction that, they won't be happy until all the guns are gone. And, constitutional rights be damned. Mm-hmm.
Well, about out of time for the segment. So real quick, where can we learn more about the American Suppressor Association?
Yeah, absolutely. You can learn about us online at AmericanSuppressorAssociation.com, and we'd love to have your listeners join up or support our cause and our efforts to fight against these kind of things.
All right. Well, Owen Miller, appreciate you being on the Silker Joe Show. Listeners, we got more programming coming up after the break.